Hey, everybody, welcome. It is the End Zone Scoop podcast. I am Dayna OG. We are excited. Shona and I are very excited. Aren't we, Shona? We'll do a little excited dance. Woohoo! Shona's tired. Shona's in nursing school and she's worn out.
I'm wearing my if I look like I'm wearing like a tea cozy around my shoulders, but it's actually a jumper, very popular in Scotland.
It is. It's super cute. Well, we're excited because our friend Daragh is here from the Undercenter podcast, and we asked him to join us since Liz was not able to join us again this week. We're so sorry. We miss you, Liz. But this is the holiday. We're not going to talk about very happy things. I was thinking about that as I was making the run sheet. I'm like, we're talking about coaches on the hot seat, and we're going to talk about bad reffing. Oh, that's not very cheery, people.
Merry Christmas.
Merry Christmas.
Oh, I did the wrong research. I have like my top 10 list of Christmas songs here beside me right now.
Oh, I'm all down for that. And I'm very picky.
There might be some hot debate with that one, but yeah.
Right.
Do that at the end.
Spoiler, Chris Ray is Driving Home for Christmas is very high on the list.
That I agree with. That I definitely agree with.
Oh my gosh. Well, we are here. We are an NFL podcast, so I guess we should probably talk about football a little bit if we can. So let's go ahead and get started. Again, Daragh, I'm so happy you're here to join us. And I love the Undercenter podcast. You guys have had me on. It's just such a good time. We're going to have you plug it at the end of the show so everyone can find it. But yes, thank you so much for joining us. All right. So let's just jump right in it because we're opinionated people and it's going to take a minute. Okay. So let's go ahead and start with bad reffing. I want to say this. Every single year, we get the complaints about the officiating. We get complaints about one team is getting screwed over another team. We get all of this conversation, right, about the reffing. But this year, and maybe we say it every year. Do we say it every year? Maybe.
I think
this is horrible. Horrible.
I actually think I just see it. I'm like, oh, they can't top last year, and then somehow they managed to top last season. To me, it's an incredible feat, actually.
It's impressive. We should give them awards. Worst official of the year. All right. So here's what I know. I know that there's a lot of conversation about the Seahawks-Rams game. We're going to talk about that. There's even more conversation about the Bears-Vikings game. But this is not something new to just this week. This was going on all season long. So let's talk, before we talk about specific calls, what do you guys, and Daragh, I'm going to start with you. What is your most annoying refereeing issue throughout the whole entire season?
Well, see, now back here in Ireland, I play on the defensive line. So I'm sort of like one of those guys that's always looking at in the trenches, and I'm always seeing like what's going on there. And the lack of offside or false start calls that we see, and then, little tiny like tweaks or nudges and they're called straight away from officials is something that does my head in. Especially I think there was the right tackle from the Jaguars. I think is it Jawan Taylor? Is it
Taylor? Mm-hmm.
Taylor, yeah. Every snap I see him play, it's a false start. He moves 2 steps before the ball's even snapped all the time, and I don't know if the official's feeling sorry for him, but I don't know what's going on. It's never called. So. Yeah. You've had a hard enough year. We're not going to call that on you.
I think they thought, they've got Urban Meyer as their coach. Got to give them some slack,
Yeah. But yeah, for me, it's those sort of calls. It's the, and then of course, when you see a nice 50 and 20 yard run from a running back, and then you just see the little yellow ticker at the bottom of the score for a flag, and then you just see that holding call that just breaks your heart. Or if it's the team that Seahawks are playing and it comes on, then it just makes your day a little bit better. But that's just the way things go. We have to take these little wins this year for being Seahawks fans. But yeah, no, they're the ones that sort of they're the ones that get me, and when it comes to officiating calls.
What about you, Shona? What area is driving you the most crazy with these officials?
The taunting rule this year. I think like it's just like such a natural. I think I've been speaking about this since the start of the season. In all sports, it's a natural thing to like it's not even taunting. You're just excited. You scored a touchdown. You do a little dance. You kind of, do something to the opposition. It happens in every single sports game. It's what makes you want to watch sport, because it's like the added camaraderie to it. They're different. I always have this joke that NFL players or basketball players or soccer players walk onto the pitch and they're completely different men to who they are when they come off the pitch. It's because it's that sort of like camaraderie they have together. And I just think the interpretation from the refs on it has just been so boring. Like for him, like I think was it a Bears player? I think it might have been a Bears player. He like accidentally like ran into the ref and was given like a taunting call. And I was just like, I'm pretty sure he was just running in the direction of you. Like, I don't know. I just think like that to me has been really frustrating, because how do you interpret taunting? Because it'll be different to different people. And it's just kind of taking the fun out of it a little bit. I feel like every year the NFL has this great idea that they're like, oh, we're going to do this and it's going to be great. And then the fans are like,
yeah. Exactly. And it is, I think it's what you just said about all of these. There's an inconsistency level in the officiating this year where it's fine one game, not fine the next, or, oh, we forgot that was a rule, or we have to follow that rule a little closer to the letter. And that does come down each week, where they will come down and they will say, we need to put an emphasis on this, and they'll send this information out. And then the next game, there's a flag every 5 seconds for something that the players didn't even realize. You know what I mean? And yes, it's their job. They're professional athletes. They need to learn the rules. I understand that. But when they change, sometimes a couple of times throughout the season, but definitely every single season, there's new things that they're, set to focus on. I think that is hard. So that consistency is really bothering me. I will say this about the taunting rule. That is the most inconsistent of all of them at this point, simply because perfect example that, depending on your view of things, beautiful game between the Saints and the Bucks, where Tom Brady was so upset, and the Saints fan or player was standing there with his arms flipped, and Tom Brady went up to him and said something to him. I didn't see a yellow flag. Did you see a yellow flag anywhere? Had that been a defensive player, they would have called that in a second. And so it's very infuriating to most that the inconsistency of a player just turning toward the sideline of the opposite team getting a flag, and then others not. It's very frustrating. But I think what has really happened here, especially in the bad calls that we saw this weekend, is the interpretation of whatever the league rules. And that in turn then makes you wonder, are these rules getting too complicated? Are they getting to a point where they're so, small little tweaks here and there, it's hard to understand? So I don't know if you follow NFL officiating on Twitter, but you should, because sometimes their explanation of bad calls, they're better than just laughing at the bad calls. It's like, are you kidding me? But this is one. So there was a play during the Bucks Vikings game where the defensive player went low on a player that didn't have the ball and caught his legs. And in turn, it was to knock him into the running back that had the ball, correct? So they called it. That has never been called before. That was new. And this was their explanation. By rule, a player cannot block an opposing player low in an attempt to go through that opposing player to make a tackle on the runner. This rule was expanded this year to any area outside of the tight end box. What? I'm supposed to remember that in the moment while I'm running and then stop. Wait, am I in a tight end box? Do you know what I mean? Like, I think they're getting too complicated.
I don't know what a tight end box is.
Well, if you don't, there's a good chance that some of those players don't either.
It's a tight end box. Is it like, do they take told like before the game, right? Mental image. This is your box. Do not leave the box. Around the box. Do not go out the box.
Right. That is my point. Daragh, are these rules just getting too complicated? I understand player safety. I get they don't want going low on people's legs. I understand it. We've seen a lot of broken bones this year. I get it.
Yeah.
But it's so complicated. It
is, but I go back to what you mentioned earlier, and it's the word consistency. There is none. it's one, you see it all the time where even commentators will say, if this ref is going to call this, but if it was another ref, he's not going to call it. A perfect example was, I know you mentioned the Tom Brady incident, but there was another incident in that Sunday night football game where he actually ran up towards the Saints sideline and ran past and said something to them, and nothing was called. But if you go to earlier on in the season, the Monday night football game between the Steelers and the Bears, where Cassius Marsh makes a tackle and just stands there and looks at the sideline of the Steelers, who cut him in preseason, and he was called for taunting, but Tom Brady wasn't. See, the consistency is the biggest problem, I think, with me, where if you want to make a rule like that with this tight end, imaginary tight end box and stuff like that, that's absolutely fine. But when we're only hearing about it for the first time 16 weeks into the season, and no one else has called it before, and it's probably happened in other games. If people want to go back and do the research, they've probably seen it. I won't, I'm sorry, but someone else can. But that's just what I think. That's just what people want. If you want to make rules in taunting and stuff like that to sort of stop that, people, yes, okay, we're going to get upset, and I agree. I think it is a stupid rule, but people would get used to it eventually if there was consistency in the calling of it.
Right. Oh, I completely agree. The funny thing is, so does Graham. So our friend Graham is watching us live, and he says, "Does any other quarterback not named Tom Brady get a flag for that?" Yeah, the answer is yes. They would for sure. So here's the thing too, and to your point right now, is that in that same Bears Vikings game, there was another one that was unnecessary roughness because the helmet got too close to the other helmet. It's very vague on what they say. The play right before that, the exact same thing happened, and it wasn't called. It was right. It was like the exact same back to back. It was called in one and not the other. And people were calling him out on that, and they're like, "Well, no, that it's different." No, it's not different. It's really not different. So it's driving me crazy. It's completely driving me crazy. So here's the thing. What a lot of people were complaining about is there's now a new level of complaining about officiating, and that comes from the betting industry, because some of these officials that are making these weird calls, these bad calls, are messing with the stat lines that then mess with people's bets, the over-unders, all of that interesting stuff. More importantly, it is actually messing with games now. And these are big moments. They are momentum changers. And that's where the Seattle Rams game comes in, when there was a non-call that should have been called that would have been a touchdown or could have led to, or was right at, I can't remember if it was right at the touchdown or almost at the touchdown. That then completely would have changed the game. It would have changed the momentum of the game. So it's not even just the little ticky-tack things. These are big moment changers. And the officials should not be involved that level in the game, in my opinion. Yeah, it drives me crazy.
I think it all stems from this, the big highlight. I mean, there's always been highlights on referees, like making really weird decisions, but particularly the Saints-Rams game, when the Rams went to the Super Bowl, like the refs were really highlighted for not making a call. And now every time they don't make a call, like for instance, the non-DPI call for Seattle, don't get me started because it just still drives me crazy. The fans automatically reference back to that. Well, it happened with the Rams before. And then all these conspiracy theories start. I feel like, oh, the NFL won the Rams at the Super Bowl because it's SoFi. I'm like, well, the Chargers play there too. So yeah, go Chargers. But yeah, it's like they but I don't blame fans for thinking this, because they easily reference things, and especially with social media now, that highlighting refs' bad decisions can get repeated all the time. And I think that's the problem, is now it's turning into, we're not actually going, oh, that was actually a really good game against Bears Minnesota, because we're going, see what the refs did.
Right. Look what happened. Yeah, it's interesting how that's going to play out over the season. I don't think it's going to change. Like I told you guys before the show started, I'm all about soccer and I'm all about VAR at this point. The automatic review of every single call at this point. Like I'm all about it at this point. So also goal line technology. Let's get that going too.
How does booth review work? Does it have to be because obviously if it's within 2 minutes, it's not reviewed. Is that right? Or I can't remember how it works.
They can't challenge. Yeah. So it has to come from the booth. And only certain plays are allowed to be reviewed from the booth. They have limitations on what can be. And I understand they're trying to keep the flow of the game. Football games are long enough at this point, people. Seriously. We don't need every flag reviewed. But at the same time, I think that there's to a certain point that there has to be a little bit more oversight. Or, as we have said for years, a little more education for the officials for sure. All right. Let's move on to our next topic. So, because guys, that's not going to get any better. I just don't see it getting any better at all.
Can I just make one point, actually, Sean?
Please
You
do.
mentioned the non-DPI call for the Rams game.
Mm-hmm.
I'm probably in the minority where I didn't hate that call.
What?
Just hear me out. Hear me out. So first of all, if you're complaining about that one when they've only scored 10 points the whole game, you've got a problem.
I mean, I'm not saying you would have won the game, but
no, I know. The call itself, but what we've always heard throughout my time watching it, and obviously you've probably been watching it longer. I'm only into it there for the last 5-6 years, but I've heard in numerous games when it's these underthrown balls like this where the player is trying to come back and get it, where the defender he has his back turned, and yes, technically it is DPI, but it's an underthrown ball that the player is trying to come back at where the player can't see. But you always hear, and I've always heard commentators always say, I hate that call. It's underthrown. What much can he do? But then when it's always called. But when it's not called, then people are giving out about it, saying, why isn't it called? Again, it comes back to that consistency thing. But technically, I didn't hate it because it was kind of more on Russ underthrowing that ball and DJ trying to come at it. It was technically, yes, letter of the law, it was DPI, it should have been called, but I didn't hate the fact that it wasn't called that much.
Right. Well, and I think, but what the same thing you just said, it was DPI by the letter of the law.
Yeah.
So call it or don't. But if you're going to call it on one play, you have to call it on the next. Do you know what I mean? And that comes back to what we've all been saying is the consistency level of it, without question, for sure. All right. So let's go ahead and start talking about some hot seats. There are some red hot seats in NFL coaching right now. I think Urban Meyer's obviously has cooled down because he got fired. So his seat's nice and cool right now. Good luck to Darrell Bevel trying to keep that one warm for a while. Oh, poor kid. Anyway, so there was a ranking that came out not too long ago about coaches. I think Sporting News did it. Coaches that had warm tushes, I think is the way that they put it. And there was a couple on there that surprised me because I didn't really consider them as coaches that could be fired. Others blatantly obvious. So the interesting thing is the first one that they had there, the seat that's warming up probably quicker than others is Joe Judge out of New York from the Giants. I feel really bad for Giants fans because they were so excited when Daniel Jones showed up. And I think they really thought they had something in that kid. And Shona, we know, but I figured they would give him a little longer when Daniel Jones didn't turn out to be what they needed him to be. They'd already fired Jason Garrett earlier this season. And Darrah, I'm going to go to you first. Are the Giants do they really need to start completely over?
Completely over? Well, the team is quite poor as it is anyway, and I think there's a lot of decisions that have been very confusing. I find the decision to give Kenny Golladay all that money and to not have a decent scheme in place where you can actually maximize his talents and actually get him the ball, I think is strange. Like that you mentioned, Jason Garrett was relieved of his duties. That's kind of like the last act of sort of a desperate coach, you would sort of say, we can't do that on offense. Let's fire the offensive coordinator because the coaches want to lose his own job. You'd look ahead, like one of my co-hosts, Jake, he's a Giants fan, and he's of the opinion that Dave Gettleman is gone in the off season anyway, and it should start with that first, and it should be a new GM head coach tandem because I think fans in New York don't trust Dave Gettleman to make another coach hire or to be in the, to be able to make that decision of who the next QB is going to be either. So, yeah, Joe, I do think it's time for Judge to go. I don't think for me personally, I don't think he's shown enough to warrant getting a chance with a new QB or a new GM and getting a new off season. I think that it's time to look at someone else.
Mm-hmm. Another one, Shona, that is on this list that surprised me because, well, I think that you'll understand why it surprised me when I tell you what team it is, but it's a Vic Fangio for the Broncos. I love the way the Broncos team is put together. I think that they've had some injury issues. They have quarterback issues. I mean, they had Teddy Bridgewater as their starter, and I love Teddy, but he's not an elite quarterback. I'm not sure how they can put that on Vic Fangio when he had this team playing awesome at the beginning of the year.
That one is the one that is surprising me the most because you know they're still competing for the playoffs at 7-7. Like they're not completely out. And obviously they've had like a wee like sort of like topsy-turvy sort of season, but I feel like a lot like, you know, we're now seeing that happening at the Cardinals. They're going through a few weeks of having struggles. Losing to the Lions, not just losing to the Lions, getting hammered by the Lions.
They got beat.
Yeah. So like that one was really, really confusing because I feel like he's doing what he's been asked. He's been told to develop youth. He's been told to build, and I don't think that would be the right move. I think he's done enough to warrant an at least another season. And yet, if it doesn't go the way they want to, like, you know, then maybe. But I don't think that would be the right move this season at all. I still think they can make the playoffs. I do. I don't think. I think there's other teams that should be getting rid of their coach way before the Denver Broncos.
For sure. If they end up with Aaron Rodgers next year, that team becomes an instant contender. I'm just telling you that defense is worth it. I know it'll make me vomit, but I'm just saying. I
already have been told never to take horse shit in the house. Now you're telling me Aaron Rodgers is going there.
It's true. That's what my grandpa used to say. All right. Another one on this list, Dara, is Matt Rule with the Panthers. I think if they hold the quarterback decision-making on Matt, there's no way he keeps his job this year. If they decide that's not all on him, he probably has a better chance. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, I don't know. I feel a bit weird now with this one with the Panthers because I kind of like what Matt Rule has done on the defensive side of the ball. I think he's actually with draft picks and, you know, in trades and free agent pickups, I think he's got a really nice defense over there. The big problem with the Panthers is that they're so reliant on Christian McCaffrey. And now we're seeing that he cannot stay healthy for a full season.
Never.
Especially with the money that they're paying him now as well. Kind of takes them out of the equation of going for a big name quarterback in the off season. I don't know if they'll be able to afford both. But yeah, I don't know, because they've had Sam Darnold, Teddy Bridgewater, Cam Newton, and who's the other one that I missed? Have I missed someone else? It will come back to me. It will come back to me. But, you know, they're trying
some other fill-in.
Yeah, they're trying to. I think what he's trying to do is these are stopgaps until they can find their franchise guy. And you know, I don't know. Like, this draft class isn't going to be great for that. If it is that they're involved in one of the big trades this year that we think might happen, whether that be an Aaron Rodgers, a Russ. If Deshaun Watson comes back into the league, we still don't know if that's going to happen. You know, there are names out there maybe to get involved in that, but like the Broncos, I think the Panthers are one QB away from actually being a contender. It's just getting that choice right, and it's so difficult. And you know, this is how head coaches lose their jobs. And if the choice this year, if he stays another year, and the choice this year is wrong, for next season, then yeah, I could see him going.
I think the Sam Darnold pick was not a bad idea. We Shona and I have been talking about Sam Darnold a lot to the dismay of some of our listeners, but we really thought that he deserved a second chance somewhere else. He had to get out from underneath the Jets. It didn't work out. Okay, well then some of it was on Sam Darnold. He was injured, but okay, so he's not the player we thought maybe he could have been, but he deserved that second chance. So I can see why they went ahead and picked it. All right. Pete Carroll's on this list. We're going to save him for just a minute. But the two that are most on fire and I think are gone, G-O-N-E, gone. Matt Nagy with the Bears. I don't see how he still has a job right now, let alone at the end of the season. and Mike Zimmer with the Vikings. Both of them, I think, scorching hot. My pick, Shona, is Nagy will definitely go. I think there's a smidge of a chance that Zimmer stays. Of the two, who do you think needs to go more? Maybe has a chance to stay.
Oh, they both need to go. Like they both,
yeah,
they both need to go. It's not working with Matt Nagy, the Bears, at all. Let's just put that out there. And I think Justin Fields needs a guy that knows how to utilize him, because that is not happening at all. I know he's injured, but they cannot have another Mitch Trubisky situation in Chicago. Like they just can't. He needs to go. But I also really think Zimmer needs to go too. The Vikings have been this team that I've just been like, I know I describe Kirk Cousins like this all the time, but just a bit beige. They're just not really doing anything. They kind of do enough sometimes to make it like they could get to the playoffs, and they do make it, and then they lose out really quickly. And I just think like it's just nothing exciting is happening, and then nothing fresh. There's nothing new, and that they have a really talented team. And you know they did trade draft well, in my opinion. I just don't think it's working, and to have that breakthrough, I think they need to move on from Zimmer.
The interesting thing there for me is that Nagy has a crap team. He has a talented quarterback that he doesn't know how to develop. But Mike Zimmer has a very talented team that he has done absolutely nothing with. They baffle the Vikings baffle me. I'm not going to lie.
Yeah, it's a weird situation with the Vikings. Like you liken it a little bit to the Seahawks, where because the Vikings have had a better season and they're in the playoff hunt, it's sort of, you know, putting a positive spin on a very difficult situation down there. Obviously with the Seahawks, they can't hide it because they have a losing record. They're not making the playoffs. The Vikings can then use the fact that, hey, we made the playoffs this year as an excuse to say, well, things are working fine, you know. But I think the fan base there have just decided, well, look, we don't want to be nearly making the playoffs every year. We don't want to be just in the playoffs for one game and then out every year. You want to sort of make that move forward. And I agree with you as well. I do think that that Zimmer is sort of on borrowed time there a little bit personally, and I think that what they would need is sort of a refresh there with that, and I think that especially for a defensive coach like he is, the defense that he's put together is just, it's not great. I know they're so reliant on the likes of, you know, Kendricks, Barr, and Harrison Smith as well to play so well, and obviously Daniil Hunter was a big part of their defense too before he went down injured. So, you know, there are some bits and pieces there, but the complementing pieces just aren't up to that level needed to sort of keep them going forward. And look, when you're in a division with the Packers and seeing them own the division every year as well, it's quite disheartening. And you can look at it and say, well, listen, can we just make a change? They made a change of head coach, and now he's the most winningest head coach there in the last couple of years, and nothing seems to have changed. So what if we get one of these young guys in and see what we can do now? But, you know, we'll see. But yeah, Nagy as well. Yeah, it's just waiting, I think, until the Monday after the final regular season game. Say thanks a lot, goodbye. I would also think that they should get rid of GM Ryan Pace as well, because I think he's sort of, you know, he's using Matt Nagy as a bit of a scapegoat himself. You know, it's been him that's sort of been putting this team together as well. And, you know, when you're relying on, you know, a 57-year-old Jason Peters there at left tackle to protect your rookie franchise quarterback, and you're getting like Jermaine Ifedi on the right tackle spot trying to keep him safe, you know, there's some questionable things there about the team building, and I think there should be a conversation about Ryan Pace as well as Matt Nagy.
Agreed. So the last one on this list is Pete Carroll, and we all know that that's tough for us. I'm just going to say this. I believe this with my whole heart. Pete Carroll will never be fired from Seattle. Jody Allen is not going to fire him. I still am pretty sure Pete Carroll will not be there next year, whether he decides to retire or if they mutually part ways, whether they let him keep his head of football operations or get rid of him completely. I think that and this is the conversation within Seahawks fans, and I think you guys know this, and our listeners probably know this. Is it Russ or is it Pete? Who's going to go? The logical answer for to me is Pete only has 2 years left on his contract. He's 70 years old. Let him go retire, be the fantastic, beloved head coach that he has been. Let him go off into the sunset, much like Mike Holmgren did in Seattle a few years back. And then hopefully find someone else. Shona, do you see that happening? And if you do you see whether or not Pete goes? Will Schneider go too? What are your thoughts on that?
I obviously love them both, and I thank them for their Super Bowl. But I feel like it gets to a point, like, all teams get to this position where they need to kind of change it up, like we've just been seeing with the Vikings. I think personally they both need to go because our draft picks haven't been great. And you kind of have to look at that a wee bit, because we're not filling in the holes that we really need to fill in. I've been screaming this since for 5 years. We need an O-line. We still don't really have one. To protect Russ, and that's what he was complaining about in the offseason, though I didn't really agree with his complaining, but that's what he was complaining about. And I think, yes, Russell hasn't been producing his usual sort of amazing sort of seasons the past couple of years, but I still think he has that in him, and I think we cannot get rid of a great quarterback to keep a coach when the coach is where he is now. And I love Pete Carroll, and I just think that I don't think he'll be fired, but I do think he will. I don't think he'll be head coach next season. And I thought that for a while. I thought that he will just retire or he'll move to the background. Because they know themselves sometimes when it's just not working anymore. And I feel like he already knows that.
Yeah, you can almost tell it in the pressers. Darryl, you and I were talking before the show that you said you wouldn't be surprised to see them both go, both Pete and Russ.
I wouldn't.
And like I said, just dump out the bucket and start from scratch.
I didn't mean Russ go. I meant John Schneider go, by the way.
I know. I knew what you meant. Yeah, I knew what you meant.
Not Ross. Do not come at the Seahawks
fans. just like what you were saying, Shona, there, and actually, Dayna, we spoke a little bit about it before we came on air here as well. That if Pete was to stay, I think that should be changes to his role within the head coaching position in the team. And I compared it to the Bill Belichick situation at the Patriots. He relieved some of his duties, most notably draft time and drafting players and having such a say on drafting players. So I think that Pete should be able to just stick with his head coaching duties, get a GM. If you want to keep John Schneider, grand, I have no problem keeping John Schneider in there, but he has to be able to work with his team to draft the players to give to Pete for Pete to coach up in the way traditionally it should be done. So I wouldn't be in favor then personally of Pete to stop being the head coach and then taking back being in player personnel, because then you still have that same problem, but you're putting it on another head coach's table, that he's going to have to deal with all these players that Pete Carroll wants in, that believes in the Pete Carroll style of play, and maybe the new head coach has a different style of play that he wants to go with. And then the same with Russ. It's I don't know if he's going to stay or not. He might stay, he might not. But if he does go, I'm of the opinion that the talk is, get a bundle of draft picks, use that going forward. I don't particularly believe in that myself. I don't mind getting the draft picks for this upcoming draft, but when it comes to next year's and the years after that, I don't like it, because if you send Russ to a team, they're going to get better. So their draft picks are going to be worse as the years go on. So I would be in favor of a players and pick situation. So whether that be with the Eagles and Jalen Hurts and a few picks, or whether that be Chicago and they say, right, give us Justin Fields and a couple of picks, that would be what I would prefer personally myself if Russ was to go.
It's going to be interesting. So Alan McGrath is watching along with us, and this is interesting. So I say Shanahan C is getting pretty warm this season too. I completely would have not believed this if I didn't have such a large Niner grouping on my Twitter timeline who 4 games ago, they wanted him gone mid-season. Like they were screaming for his head. And they brought up how many winning seasons he's actually had while he's been there. 2. And not including this year. Yeah. And so, and he always has players injured. He drafts well, but he doesn't use players well. I would have thought the Niners fans were diehard Shanahan fans. They're not. They are not in love with him. So that's an interesting prospect too. I don't think it'll be this year. I think they're going to wait and see what they can do with their rookie quarterback after they get rid of Jimmy this year. But I think they'll give it one more year. But his seat is a little warm. I would agree with that.
I don't think their quarterback, though, is their answer. Like, I just think that for some reason, the 49ers just seem to have this every year. I don't know what, like I said this on plenty of podcasts, I don't know what he does. I don't know what he does with training. I don't know what he does in practices, but he's losing his key players really early on every year. It just feels like it's like, it feels like they're also in a wee bit of a rut. It's a weird rut of we're going to do great this year, and then bam, injuries, and then they're terrible.
The injury lottery. Who wins this year?
Yeah, but it's like literally it's like somebody picks a short straw at the start of the year, and it's always Shanahan. He's like, it's all right. I've got at least 20 guys I can injure within 2 minutes.
Right. Crazy. All right. So we've gone over our time, but I want everyone to stick with us because we have one more little segment. It's a short segment, I promise. But I want to talk about last week, Shona and I talked about what we called the muck in the middle. And it was all of these teams that were still playoff eligible, including the Seahawks until just the other day. I mean, there was only 2 teams really that had been ruled out completely of the playoffs because there were so many teams stuck right in the middle. And so we were talking about that last week. But it's getting a little clearer now, just a little bit. But still, the only team that has clinched a playoff spot is the Packers. That's it. Could you imagine? That's just so bizarre to me. Although this week, I think 7 more teams can clinch. So it's going to clear up a lot. But I wanted to talk about some of these, I hate to call them lower level, but they're the kind of the playoff or that wild card teams, those teams that are going to kind of just squeak in. As of right now, outside of the top 4, so it's the Rams, the Niners, and the Vikings are in 5, 6, and 7 for the NFC. The Colts, the Chargers, and the Bills for the AFC. Sorry, you look at those 2 lists, the AFC list is much stronger. I'm just going to tell you that right now. But then the Ravens are still right there. The Steelers are right there. The Eagles are there. Believe it or not, the Saints don't have a quarterback. But sure, they're still in the playoffs. Why? Because they beat Tom Brady. So good for you. You deserve a spot automatically. So Washington is still there. You have all these teams. The Dolphins, the Raiders are all at 7 and 7. Like, it's kind of crazy. So looking at those kind of mid-levels, those teams that the 2 weeks ago we called in the middle, the muck, are kind of rising to the top. Which one do you think some of these top tier teams should be more afraid of is kind of what I'm looking at here. And I'm going to go ahead and go first. I have been amazingly impressed with the Indianapolis Colts all year. I love the way they're playing. I love that defense. I like the way it's going. And, their quarterback has his moments. Carson Wentz, God love you. But you make some questions. But then they have Jonathan Taylor sitting there telling everyone he's going to save the world. And by God, he's going to save the world. He saved my fantasy football team. So I'm going to pick the Colts. I think of all of those teams, in either one, they're the ones that are going to come up and bite you in the ass a little bit. I just really feel it. Daragh, what do you feel?
Yeah, I like the Colts for the same reasons that you mentioned, Dayna. One team that looks like they're not in the playoff picture at the moment, but if they were to sneak in, I would think that a few teams would not want to face them, and that's the Eagles. Yeah, I think that for a team that now, and I'll admit that I sort of dumped on them at the start of the year when they hired Nick Sirianni out of nowhere, when he got like no head coaching interviews at any other place, but he seemed to take this one. And the steps that Jalen Hurts has made forward this year, it has been very, very impressive. They have a good running game at the moment as well. Their defense is one of these weird ones where they shouldn't be as good as they are, but they are stifling a lot of teams. And no team seem to be able to get a lot of points on them at this stage of the year. Now, I know earlier on the year there was a few, especially I remember the Chiefs went to the link and sort of put a good, like 40 points on them or something like that. But this defense has been getting better. And I don't know. I think that they could, if they were to say get in the 7th spot, they currently then would probably face the Cowboys. That's a divisional matchup in the playoffs. The Cowboys would not want to face them at any stage of the year at all. And I think that they could surprise a few.
You never want a divisional matchup in a wild card spot ever, because you never know how it's going to turn. Divisional games are too chaos. You have no idea how they're going to work out. So true. Shona, what about you? Do you remember how diehard I was on the Bills at the beginning of the year, Shona? And now I'm just so sad.
I actually worried they won't even make the playoffs. Like, they barely have a tiebreaker over the Ravens. Like,
I know. Breaks my heart. Anyway, how about you?
I agree with both of you, really. Mostly the Colts. I'm so surprised. At the start of the season, I was kind of like, yeah, whatever. The Colts, they'll just be the same, not really do much. Well, I was wrong. They showed me up. But yeah, I think. Yeah, I don't know. Like, this is the most exciting thing about the wild card spots. You just don't really know who's going to make a big splash. It was Titans a few years ago. I think the Colts could be that team again. You just don't expect them to do, that well. Like, not that they won't do that well. They're a great team, but like, really, like the Titans, they got to the championship game. You're like, where did that come from? Right. Like, that's the kind of excitement you want to see. But the one game the projected game that I would love to watch right now, and you should say nobody wants a division game, but it would be Cardinals at Rams. That would be carnage. Absolute carnage. And I would be so for it. I'd be so rooting for the Cardinals, and that feels so dirty, but I would be.
That is true. Like, it would be just a mess. The other game that would be really interesting if they ended up a divisional matchup would be the Chiefs-Chargers. They split their games in the season. It'd be so good. I love it. I love this stuff. I just think it's so fun. And you know what? We're not going to know till the end of the season. No. I think it's going to be that close all the way through.
There is one big factor, though, and especially with the AFC, because it's so tight there, like there's no margin for error, is that like COVID is going to play such a big role these next couple of weeks. Absolutely. A huge role. We've seen what's happened now. Obviously, with the Browns, they lost half their team and ended up losing a tough game against the Raiders. The Chiefs this week are having a lot of issues when it comes to
they have
COVID.
13 on the list right now, I think.
13. And the Saints now have put Taysom Hill on the COVID reserve list. I think because Ian Book is going to be their starting quarterback now, and they're trying to get into the playoffs. There's going to be so many other teams now over these last 3 weeks where they're going to lose players. And I don't know if games are still going to be postponed and rescheduled. We obviously we won't know, but there'll be a lot of depleted teams, and that could cause a few teams their playoff spot, which would be absolutely heartbreaking for that to happen.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely, I agree. And I think even the now adjusted rules around COVID and their testing, I don't know that that's going to make a huge difference. They're now going to they're doing random testing. And that's how there was a player, AFC player, I can't remember which it was, that was just randomly tested. And, it was Will Dissly for the Seahawks, randomly tested, popped up, has no symptoms. Well, now he can't play. And it's like, okay, but it was a random test. So then everyone who's been in close contact, it's just going to be that way. So even the adjusted rules aren't really going to help those teams that much, which is too bad. Washington got quite a few of their players back today. So that is good news for them, because they too are right there in the mix. So crazy stuff. Daragh, please tell everyone where they can find you. Thank you so much for hanging out with us today.
No problem at all. No problem. Thank you so much for having me on. Always delighted to come on and talk a bit of football. You can follow us on Twitter and Instagram at UnderCenterPod. That's where you'll find us, and that's where you'll find all of our shows. We do 2 shows a week, normally on a Tuesday and a Thursday. Tuesday review show. Thursday we look ahead to Thursday Night Football, have a couple of guests on, have a bit of a chat. And we're also on YouTube. Just search Under Center Podcast. The same for your audio side of things if you want to get all of our latest shows. So follow us there, keep up to date with it. And we just love to have a bit of fun. We like to dump on a few teams as well on Twitter as well. It's all just good fun. So go in, join the conversation, and catch up with some shows and join in as well. It'd be great fun.
I've been lucky enough to be on the show, but your guests, God, you get some really good guests. They're good. They're impressive. I love it. Absolutely love it.
The look of the Irish is a thing. That's what it is. It is a thing.
It is. Yeah.
All right. Well, Shona and I will be back again in a couple of weeks. And so we hope everyone has a fantastic holiday season. Stay safe over New Year's, people. Behave yourself. And we'll be back and see you soon. And as always, enjoy football. Bye-bye, everybody.